Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So my social media links, along with email and Substack, will be provided for you. And a rating is greatly important. I appreciate feedback, so it will help out a lot if you give me a rating across all the podcast platforms I'm on. Okay, so podcast platforms. I'm on Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and I'm definitely looking to grow to wherever you enjoy your podcast. I'm on that. So this episode is about Pete Seeger and his music. I'm going to give some thoughts and dive into his album and his I'll narrow it down, but touch on the aspects of his music. All right, so let's dive in. I want to touch on this aspect before I dive in. I think it's very unique, particularly with Pete Seeger, how introducing and being introduced to music as a child, I had mentioned on Monday with his father upbringing as far as music is considered. I think it's very just how it inspired him to become influential in music, and the fact that he chose the path of folk music. I think it says a lot about the particular, I would say, mind and sort of within the mentality of that, how he sees fit in the world in which we live in. So what am I saying by this? What I'm saying is that typically people who are folk artists, they are commentators of how we see life, how we view life. And then on the flip side, for instance, going into different aspects of creativity, particularly in comedy, I equate this to the particular comedians, notably Jerry Seinfeld and many others that follow him, who take the stance to say, particularly with Jerry Seinfeld, hey, did you ever notice this? And I see it this way. That's kind of funny. I wonder why it's like this. And then having that, of course, Jerry Seinfeld, the humor is not for everyone, but having that stance of the cynical scene every day and making comments and jokes about that. And it's very freeing because it opens up the conversation for people to start thinking about things in a different way and realizing stuff and uniting in their differences, but also with disagreeing, if it happens, starts to build up a conversation and talk about things on more than a surface level. And you start to realize and pick up and think about how we move as human beings. And so let me surface back, funny I say that. Well, let me pull back to folk artists and Pete Seeger. Having the natural authenticity of singing and songwriting, but also going within causes and taking stance with who you are. And I think it was very noble of him to, it's very easy to do, to falter down and just back down and just go and give in. But he chooses to stand his grounds and say, particularly what I'm mentioning is when he was in the midst of the Red Scare movement, and he took his stance and said, if you believe that, go ahead, but this is not who I am. And to look at the real issues and that everything isn't always black and white, which is unfortunate because that's how some people think, and most of the time that's how most people think. And then also digging into the area of that, you know, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and not to read much into things and to see things for what it is. And over time, you'll start to realize that. And I think it's very interesting how that all evolved, and his music, you know, withstand the test of time, and people grew, and over time it just started to have a different perspective on people's minds about him and his body of work. All right, so let's dive in. Let's talk about his music. All right, We Shall Overcome. Now, this was a part of the album of Pete Seeger's Greatest Hits, 1948. This song is based on the early hymn. It's based on the early hymn. Charles Albert Tindley, who was a minister at Bainbridge St. Methodist Church in Philadelphia, and also a gospel music composer, added the words in 1901 and called this new hymn, I'll Overcome Someday. In the ensuing decades, this song became a favorite at black churches throughout the American South, often sung as I Will Overcome. The song evolved at the Highland Folk School in Monteagle, Tennessee, which was a meeting place and activity center for civil rights activists founded in 1932. It was later renamed the Highlander Center and relocated to New Market, Tennessee. In 1947, striking tobacco workers from Charleston, South Carolina, attended a workshop there and introduced the song as I Will Overcome to the cultural director of the school. I believe the pronunciation is Zilpha, and last name Horton. She began performing the song at her school workshops and taught it to Pete Seeger when he visited the center. Seeger published the song in 1948 in the newsletter for his People's Songs Collective and began performing it. He changed the title to We Shall Overcome and also added 2 new verses and a banjo part. And it's very interesting how, again, the spirituality mixed within the mentality and the mindset of the civil rights movement. And this particular song is part of the mentality that when people who understand about the history of the civil rights think about we shall overcome, and having that stance of spiritual aspects of understanding when you're fighting against prejudice and you're fighting against injustice that is, I think it helps to rein in that spiritual aspect of everything to get a deeper perspective. Within that deeper perspective, you start to understand that I am bigger than myself. This is bigger than myself. This is bigger than me. And there is a way out of this. There's always a light. And in faith, I think, encourages that the people who see faith fit in their everyday life and who truly embrace it and welcome it, see these things fit. And it's heartfelt how that changes a person's mentality. All right. Seeger published the song in 1948 in the newsletter, as I was saying, of the People Song Collective, and began performing it. And he changed the title, We Shall Overcome, and he added the banjo part, as I was saying. In 1958, Guy Carawan took over as cultural director at the Highlander School, where the song was now a staple. Carawan brought it to the burgeoning civil rights movement when he played it at the first meeting at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960. Members of the group spread word of the song, and as it soon came about in the presence of people's mentality, it was sung across America as at visuals, at rallies, at protests, and other gatherings that called for an inspirational song of freedom. Well, the song is most closely associated with Pete Seeger. He downplayed his contribution, saying that the song already existed and that all he really did was change will to shall, because it opens up the mouth better. When Pete Seeger played his updated version of We Shall Overcome to the American civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., he gave King's civil rights movement its anthem. Seeger performed the song for King on September 2nd, 1957, when they attend the 25th anniversary of the Highlander Center in Tennessee, where King gave the keynote address at the seminar entitled The South Thinking Ahead. In his speech, King talked about bringing together committees to work past differences in religion, race, and economic classes as well. Among those in the audience was Rosa Parks, whose refusal to move to the back of the bus in 1955 gallivanted the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama. King mentioned her in his speech. You would not have had a Montgomery story without Rosa Parks. King was pragmatic but optimistic in his address. The future is filled with vast and marvelous possibilities, he said. This is a great time to be alive. The seminar caught the attention of politicians who opposed integration efforts, and propaganda spread, labeling the school as communist, something Seeger had been called for years. The only artist to chart with this song was Joan Baez, whose version reached number 90 in the U.S. in November of '63. She performed the song at the March on Washington on August 28, '63, before Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. The album containing the studio from the event was released as We Shall Overcome, documentary on the March on Washington. After her first trip to England in 1965, where she performed with Bob Dylan, Baez's version of this classic protest anthem went to 26 on the UK chart. Baez also sang it at Woodstock in 1969, closing out the day. The festival around 2 a.m. with the song. At the time of day, Baez was pregnant with her son, Gabriel, and her husband. David Harris had recently been thrown in jail for resisting the draft. Harris led an anti-war movement called the Resistance. She dedicated the song to Harris and encouraged the crowd to sing along. It's very interesting, too, that, with Woodstock, the whole mentality of that, too, is free love, free will, whatever devil may care, here we go. And then with this Joan Baez taking a stand, And seeing herself in the midst of all this and about speaking on morality of people with, particularly with the racial morality, really speaks a lot with that tone and changing the tone of music, changing the tone of the atmosphere of a different perspective about Woodstock. In 2009, Bias posted a version on YouTube for the people in Iran singing a verse in Farsi. The song wasn't copyrighted until October 7th, 1963. Listed as new material arranged for voice and piano with guitar chords and some new chords. The copyright was granted to Seeger, Guy Carawan, Horton, and Frank Hamilton. Horton had died in 1956. Okay, in 2006, Bruce Springsteen included this song on his album We Shall Overcome, the Seeger Session, which contained his version of various songs written by Pete Seeger, who, like Springsteen, championed the working class and fought against institutional oppression. Singer told The Guardian, "I have managed to survive all these years by keeping a low profile, and my cover is blown. If I had known, I'd have asked him to mention my name somewhere inside." The album won a Grammy for Best Traditional Folk Art Album. Springsteen recorded it without the E Street Band. It was the first album of cover songs he ever recorded. The copyright of this song was challenged in a 2006 lawsuit by the nonprofit We Shall Overcome Foundation, whose leader, Gambo, wrote a book about the history of the song. I believe the pronunciation of his first name is Isis. Gambo said that when he tried to get permission to use the song in a documentary, he was denied by Ludlow Music, the publisher who owns the rights on behalf of the 4 credited songwriters, including Pete Seeger. Questioning why the song isn't public domain, Gambo hired the same law firm that had recently emancipated Happy Birthday and brought the case against Ludlow. When Seeger and his cohorts copyrighted the song, they did it with good intentions, channeling the profits to the Highlander School. Seeger believed that the song, rooted in tradition, should be free to the public, but he knew that if he didn't stake a claim to We Shall Overcome, someone else would likely have a profit of motive. "They're not my songs, they're old songs. I just happen to sing them," he said when Bruce Springsteen released the tribute album. The copyright does restrict the song, though, and preventing it from being used in a documentary. It was certainly not Seeger's intention. In 2018, Ludlow settled the case and released We Shall Overcome into the public domain. This was welcome news for anyone looking to use the song in a book, movie, or video. But bad news for a Highlander. Ludlow issued a statement that read, "Now, given its more limited copyright protection, any individuals, corporations, or advertising agency may use the song's words and melody in any manner they wish, including inaccurate historical use, commercials, parodies, spoofs, and jokes, and even for political purposes by those who oppose civil rights for all Americans. This is the saddest result of the case. In this era of hate and dismissiveness, which I concur with this, now more than ever, We Shall Overcome should be a fully protected work and cherished as all the national treasures. Yes, I very concur with this, with how this is said, because it's unfortunate that the mentality most of today, that a disdain against America, that to be an American is not a powerful thing or a noble thing with proofs in the pudding with that. If that's the case, why is it still a lot of people wanting to come here and get their stake in the land of opportunity? And it's just one of those things that I see when I hear these things in the news and have conversations, and people have this kind of mentality. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. You got to take a second look at that. All right, so I'm going to wrap up with the last song. Guantanamera is part of the album World of Pete Seeger in 1962. Guantanamera is a Spanish word meaning a woman from Guantanamo, a city on the southeast tip of Cuba where the notorious Guantanamo Bay military base detention camp is located. The United States has released the area under a treaty signed in 1903, but the song has nothing to do with it. The refrain, Gaira Guantanamera, means peasant girl from Guantanamo. A Cuban band leader named Fernandez had a radio show in the 1930s called La Guantanamera, and he regularly performed the song, changing the verse lyrics every time to be about whatever he felt like talking about. Only Gaira Guantanamera was a part mentioned that was constant. Later, a Cuban musician named Albano from 25 to 1991 put lyrics to the song based on a poem written by Cuban writer Jose Marti. The poem is about a girl from Guantanamo and was written from the point of view of a Cuban revolutionary. Albano was a professor at the Manhattan School of Music, where Hector Algo, a student from Santa Clara, Cuba, was attending on scholarship. Algo learned the song from Albano, and in July of '62, Algo played it for Pete Seeger when both were attending the folk festival in the Catskills in upstate New York. The festival was a part of a camp where Algo was working as a counselor for the summer. Seeger loved it and began performing the song. In October that year, the Cuban Missile Crisis reverted the nation as the Soviet Union threatened to deploy nuclear missiles in Cuba. With this backdrop, the song became a peace anthem of sorts. Not because it had anything to do with peace, but whether it was a Cuban song with a catchy chorus that some Americans actually knew. The song grew in popularity, and cover versions started to appear in America. It became a hit in '66 when a Los Angeles folk trio called the Sandpipers recorded a version that hit number 7 in the UK and number 9 in the US. The song is made of 2 parts which do not have any relation whatsoever. Part 1. In the 19th century, an anonymous popular song circulates with the word Guantanamera, which means peasant woman from Guantanamo. It was also collected and arranged in 1932 by Fernandez, who made it the hallmark of his orchestra and popularized it as a dance called Guerrera song, which he used in place of the bolero, believe pronunciation of that, and closing every ball. La Guerrera is therefore the name of the dance too. So in part 2, it is not before 58 that Orban combined this popular refrain with some taken at random from the immense poem it with the simple verses by Marti. It says, yo soy yo hombre sincero. But you have to wait for hundreds of verses before finding con los pueblos de la tierra. At the last word, well, in the line in a claiming to Seeger Guthrie protest song style. Marti never mentioned any guerrilla from Guantanamo in those verses. As in many popular songs, you can find any logical link between the verses and the refrain. In the 90s, but the song became a popular chant. However, the song became a popular chant among English soccer fans, often used in tribute to a star player with the lyrics suitably altered. It was most often sung in honor of Alan Shearer. Sung as one of Alan Shearer, there was only one Alan Shearer. In Sweden, there's a series about cycling, and in 2003, the government launched the campaign to encourage the practice with that song to set the tone of Pantamayra. Pantamayra means cycling more in Swedish, with the public service announcement often played on TV, encouraging citizens to return used bottles and reduce waste. Many variations of the song have been used. I think it's quite interesting how all of these different things turn into this one song about the importance of understanding different cultures and immersing in your appreciation of these different cultures, what can expand out of that, and how it can reframe itself and resurface itself in different mindsets throughout the decades, and how you take in let's go back to how the song originated. It was originally for the Cuban ties, and how the spiritual, not more of the, that's the wrong word choice, more of the spirit within the culture of dance, and how the uplifting of using a song to shed light of class division, and then bringing it back, and then moving on to the 90s and different decades, and how the song is tied to fitness, particularly with soccer and soccer fans, and how they use this to rally around the particular soccer team that is in the mindset of people that they enjoy, of their fans, how their fans use the song to embrace their soccer team. And then also linking it in another country, how this is used as the vehicle per se to promote the health aspect and the mentality of taking care of your planet. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harvard Light. And again, feedback is greatly important. So you want to email me, it would be greatly appreciated. And also give me a rating on all of the platforms that I'm on. I would really appreciate that. So, I'll see you on Monday. I'll hear you on Monday, that is. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye now.